Dylan Bailey said he worked as a Telstra 000 operator in Melbourne for almost 2 weeks in February, but resigned shortly after 2 gut-wrenching calls. One was from a woman seeking an ambulance in Melbourne for her young daughter, who was unresponsive on the floor. She waited minutes for her call to be transferred. Soon after, he said he spoke to a woman in the Northern Territory. He said that as she whispered into the phone, it sounded as if her face had been beaten. Dylan Bailey said his time as a Telstra 000 operator left him demoralized. Jason South, every 4 to 5 rings, you're supposed to say, "Just connecting you through. I'll stay on the line with you until we get through," and there's about 6 or 7 similar sayings. And then you just restart them. And I did that for about 7 minutes, and this woman's kind of like begging, "Please." NSW Ambulance was another of the organizations singled out by Telstra staff for its long delays receiving calls in recent years, with wait times of more than 5 minutes reported as recently as Tuesday night. Ambulance calls for Western Australia and Victoria Police were also named. But when asked about the biggest cause of recent delays, most of the Telstra call takers spoken to by The Age pointed to calls for an ambulance in Victoria. Earlier this month, it was reported that 4 children and 8 adults have since October last year, after those seeking help for the gravely ill waited up to 16 minutes to reach an ESTA ambulance operator. When Victorian emergency calls are receiving the recorded message warning of high demand, they are also diverted to a limited group of Telstra call takers. One Melbourne call taker said staff at the centre were roughly split 50 to 50, with half dedicated to Victoria and the rest to the other states. The number of operators dedicated to Victorian calls is restricted to keep some operators free to take calls for other states, essentially preventing the Victorian ambulance delays clogging the entire national Telstra 000 system. One call taker said before the Victorian calls started being diverted last year, there were times when their entire call centre became snowed under by delayed ambulance calls, and the room was filled with echoes of the same phrases. At our busiest time, the call centre is very noisy, but you can still hear pretty much everybody saying the same thing continuously, "We won't take long. I'll stay on the line until they answer. And I'll make sure you get through," said one veteran operator. Because all Victorian calls to emergency services are sent to the limited pool of Telstra call takers when the voice message is active, it means people trying to reach police or fire services in Victoria may be caught up in the clogged Victorian queue. One morning in November, when it was taking up to 8 minutes to transfer ambulance callers in Victoria to ESTA, there were 14 Telstra operators assigned to Victorian calls and 16 for the rest of the nation. Over the same 16-minute period, the 14 operators taking Victorian calls could answer just 80 calls, as they battled delays, while the 16 call takers dedicated to the interstate calls could take about 270 calls, according to a spokesperson for Federal Communications Minister Paul Fletcher, who oversees the National 000 service. A Telstra spokeswoman said the surge initiative was created following the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires in Victoria and is requested by state emergency service dispatchers across the nation in instances of high demand because of fire, flood and more recently, COVID-19. This year a recorded voice announcement was used for NSW callers during the major flooding, she said. And for a month over January and February this year, all Australian callers to 000 also received a pre-recorded message noting increased COVID-19 related demand before they were connected to an operator. ESTA has reported the call answering times in February were a significant improvement on January, a trend supported by Telstra workers who say the delays are still long but reducing. They've recently been reporting delays of 30 seconds to 7 minutes to reach Victorian ambulance operators, rather than the delays of up to 15 minutes previously. You do have days where you walk in and your first call is Victoria Ambulance and you're waiting 5 or 6 minutes, and you think, "Oh no, here we go," and often it will be like that for a few hours, said one operator. We've all experienced times where you've got people who desperately need the ambulance and you're losing people on the line. It's terrible. As they detailed the chronic delays, Multiple Telstra staff in Melbourne and Sydney said there needed to be more support and training for workers to handle upsetting delayed calls, saying there was an underlying attitude that people should be either able to handle the stresses of the job or leave. Mr. Bailey claims managers told him they coped with the stress of the calls because "I don't know these people, so I don't care, and it's 000, what do you expect? I kind of went into the role thinking, this will be good because I'll be doing something in which I'll be able to help people in their most vulnerable moments. And then you realize that it's really not about that at all. It's really just another call center, you're just supposed to not have it get to you. And here's a card for a corporate psychology service. If you're having problems, give them a call." I was really quite shocked. Responding to some of these criticisms, the Telstra spokeswoman said the company had a strong focus on the well-being of our team and have on-site support available around the clock through specialist clinicians and Benistar. "We are the first to acknowledge that this is a complex job and it requires a particular type of person, and because of this it isn't a job for everyone." About 11%, or almost 96,000 ambulance 000 calls for Victoria were not answered within 10 seconds by an ambulance operator in the last financial year, compared with almost 6% in NSW. Loading the worst state performer for the year was Western Australia, where 16.7% of calls weren't answered within the 10-second window, though the data doesn't include the worst of the Delta and Omicron waves in Victoria and NSW, and recent floods, which have stretched emergency services. The Victorian government has pledged to recruit an extra 163 call takers to address the state's call answering delays. ESTA advises that it continues to recruit for new call takers, with more applications coming in daily. ESTA is also on track to have every call taker training slot booked until June, a Victorian government spokesperson said. 3 of the Telstra call operators the Age spoke to said they believed people have on the phone while they tried in vain to patch callers through. Loading one Sydney call taker said they were recently told by a 000 caller that they were having a heart attack and couldn't breathe before hearing a thud. They said they couldn't remember a single recent night shift since about August, when their attempts to connect a Victorian ambulance call through to the state's 000 service wasn't met with a delay. The veteran call taker said people would ask them whether they should drive to a hospital instead, but they weren't allowed to provide advice, even if they believed it probably would be a quicker option. "We get constantly argued with people yelling and screaming at us, as if it's our fault.